This is Don Putnam.
This is Paul Cleverley.
This is Ralph Kurz.
And you're listening to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast.
Welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast, a podcast dedicated to exploring the applied philosophy of traditional Stoicism. The College of Stoic Philosophers is an online school founded in 2008. We at the college endeavor to educate all who would be Stoics and Stoic philosophers who aspire to the good life within the world community. Podcast episodes will include discussions of Stoic history, application, interviews, and much more, all while having some fun, fate permitting. I'm your host, Mark Sterry. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. Welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. We are here today with Don Putnam, Paul Cleverley, and Ralph Kurz. Ralph, where are you zooming in from today there, bud?
I am zooming in today from Germany, Bonn, near Bonn.
And Ralph, can you tell us about your Spartan race you're working on?
Well, it's work in progress. Yes, pain is my daily guest, so to say, in every muscle and whatever. So yeah.
So, what are some of the obstacles you're going to have to do in the Spartan race?
There are 20 obstacles, but for me as a beginner, it's also a lot of running and swimming. So maybe 22 obstacles. And it's one of those races where we have to swim in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow.
I think it's going to be nice. But then, of course, there's some stuff where you have to hang like monkey bars, or where you have to jump or somehow get over some walls and whatever. So this is stuff I couldn't practice yet, and I think I'm not going to practice it until the race happens. So,
are you going to be able to shoot your bow and arrow during this obstacle challenge?
There's some kind of spear throwing. No bow and arrow, only spear throwing, like Spartan. This heavy stuff the Spartan warriors did. Yeah.
Wow. Sounds interesting, Ralph. We'll have to have you back on again and so folks can hear how it all went. Don Putnam, my good friend, how are you doing, brother?
Doing well. Thank you.
Where are you zooming in from? Texas?
Yeah, from Houston, Texas.
How's everything in the oil business?
Well, we always hear rumors about what's going to happen, but yeah, so far so good. We'll see.
How is your study into philosophy and therapy going?
Good. I've not focused on therapy yet, but since we last talked, I graduated with my philosophy degree in June. Just keep writing a lot of stuff on my blog, and just been turning some of that content into kind of my own podcast at the behest of my wife and friends and family who don't want to read my stuff but want to listen to it. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
Excellent. And Paul Cleverley, how are you doing, my friend?
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great, Paul. Where are you zooming in from today, my friend?
I'm zooming in from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Excellent. Can you confirm the rumors that Metallica is going to be at the Sphere?
Boy, I'll tell you, I went to the Sphere a couple months ago, and if they're coming to the Sphere, you want to come to Las Vegas.
Who did you go see?
We went and saw the one on the Earth, kind of nature on the Earth. It was quite amazing.
That's incredible. And this is Paul's first time on the podcast. The other two guys are podcast veterans. So welcome onto the show, Paul. And what we're doing here today is we're discussing one of our favorites, pre-Socratic Heraclitus. A course I came up with a number of years ago, and Don took it and now teaches the course. Paul took it and now teaches the course. And Ralph graduated from it recently, wrote an excellent paper. And we're here just to talk a little bit about Heraclitus, who he is, and just get some discussion going through a few of the fragments and so forth. So I'm just going to throw questions out to you guys. Whoever wants to grab them, we'll just discuss it. So if my grandma's listening, who is Heraclitus? Don, you want to explain who he is?
Yeah, I mean, so we all talk about Socrates as kind of like the father of philosophy. And so we all have heard of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, but then you start talking about the pre-Socratics. And so Heraclitus is one of those philosophers that came before Socrates. I forget like how many years or centuries it was before Socrates, a few hundred maybe, but he was one of those philosophers that kind of kick-started the Hellenistic philosophical tradition.
He was around 500 BC, and he was from
Okay.
Ephesus, which is now Turkey, I believe. Ralph, you want to add to anything of that?
Well, I think in terms of when you lived, and maybe we can add something how we influenced philosophy, or at least I think which terms he, I wouldn't say coined, but somehow put heavy emphasis on, like the idea of logos, this reason in the world, so to say, or some kind of cosmic law. We have this cosmic fire, we have flux, like constant change and stuff. So he influenced a lot of philosophers after him, directly and indirectly, and of course somehow the Stoics, of course.
Absolutely. Paul, what's your thought on if someone asked you who is Heraclitus, what would you say?
I would say Heraclitus is the one that replaced mythos with the logos. Let's get rid of the magical thinking and add the reason and develop the reason.
And we are familiar with his work just through fragments. He had a book called On Nature, but all we really have is what's a little over 100 or so fragments of his, and they're written kind of a paradoxical, riddle-ish kind of style. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably one of the things that I like about Heraclitus a lot. In fact, I was just grading one of my students' submissions just a few minutes before this podcast, but we were talking that because of his cryptic, mystic nature of his writings, it causes you to really think about it. You can't just read it once and go, "Oh, okay, I understand what you're talking about." You have to really think about it, spend time with it, and I think that's the benefit of Heraclitus's writings and his fragments.
I remember when I was writing the course, I would do a Eric Wiegard meditation, and I would listen to the fragments. It took about 20 minutes to listen to them. And I think I came up with a different thought or definition of what he was getting at pretty much every time. And I've repeated this story before, how we got into Heraclitus. Don and I were taking physics with Eric Wiegard, the founder, and he mentioned Heraclitus. Remember that, Don? And he was talking
Yes.
about how he would have insomnia and try to remember Heraclitus fragments, and then told us the story that with Zeno, how it relates to the Stoics. We'll get into that a little later. But Zeno, who started the Stoicism, he went to the Oracle of Delphi, which I'm not really. What is the Oracle of Delphi? Just to kind of define that.
It's an ancient, also, of course, in ancient times, it's a place, and in the north of Athens, I think, north of Athens somehow, and it's a place where a lot of people went to get some like divinations from an oracle, or from, I don't know, from the Pythia. I think was a woman who was in trance or on drugs or whatever, and had some insights into, maybe to the logos at least, gave all the people who are asking some kind of message, omen, no, an oracle. Yeah, so this is what the oracle is in the end. Yeah.
And to be clear, it was not a bar that Ralph and I hung out at in Athens. Anyway, so according to folklore, our story is that Heraclitus, or Zeno of Citium, talked to the Oracle of Delphi when he was putting together Stoicism, and they said to him something to the effect of, I looked this up, it's either lie with the dead, sleep with the dead, something cool like that. And he took that as study philosophers before him, and that's when he discovered Heraclitus and really related to a lot of his works and used him as the framework for Stoic physics. Is that how you guys learned it as well?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Why would Heraclitus be important to the Stoics? Paul, you want to take that one?
Okay. Heraclitus was important because he talked about reason as a characteristic that humans want to develop. The Stoics said we were born with certain innate qualities and developed through our childhood into adulthood. But in order to become fully human, we've got to exercise our reason. The more reason we have, the logos that we develop, the better our functioning, the better our life experience, and the more happiness we would have.
Any other relations, Don? You got any more where Heraclitus would be important to the Stoics?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ralph talked about it quite a bit, and Paul just talked about it, the logos, the reason behind everything. A couple of other related aspects of Heraclitus that the Stoics appreciated would probably be, the tension. Like, again, Stoic physics talks about the tension, and there's different levels of tension. And Heraclitus talks a lot about tension and the opposites and all that kind of stuff. And then he also mentions kind of, what the Stoics call the active principle, pneuma, fire, right? So there's a lot of that too. When the essay I talked about, we talk about like wet souls being, unwise souls, but the dry soul is a soul that's very wise and who's had a lot of experience. And again, that active element of fire and pneuma and everything is kind of imbued with that too.
I have that on one of my questions here, so I'm just going to throw this out right now. What is the difference between a dry soul and a wet soul for people that are reading Heraclitus?
I mean, I kind of think of it like as, again, some of the Stoic physics talks about like maybe even the entire universe goes through the conflagration, goes through different cycles. You have like the combination of the elements, and so like water becomes air, air becomes fire, I think also water becomes earth. You've got these elements about it, right? And so talking about the change and the evolution of not only universe at a macro level, but also at a micro level. And I think at the individual, somebody who's maybe wet is somebody who's like unwise, who needs to keep learning and growing. And so it's kind of symbolic of that natural evolution of the journey of the cosmos as well as the journey of the individual.
He says something to the effect the drunk person has a wet soul. Is that right?
I've heard that, yeah.
In my business, I know a lot of wet souls. Another thing he talks about a lot, Ralph, I was going to throw this your way, is our inherent rational principle, the logos. Can you explain what he means by the logos?
Yeah. Where to start? So let's start with the word logos, which I think it wasn't known before in Greek, of course, as the word for word, which is interesting, or at least I think maybe one idea before. The way Heraclitus develops the idea of logos, I think is quite interesting in order to get an idea of what the Stoics could have meant with, or how their idea of logos is, because to get the history of an idea, at least for me, was quite an eye-opener to access the Stoics a little bit better. So let's go back to the word. The main roots of this word are like, yes, logos is a word. It comes from like to collect or to read something. It could be a meaning as well, and it could also be some kind of the meaning of discourse or account. And so there's something to collect. There's something laid out in the world, and there's something to collect. And this is, in the end, it's what is like the world reason, the common reason, the reason in the world. This is somehow laid out, and we can collect it, if you want it, in a metaphorical way.
Paul, do you want to add to what logos means, especially to the Heraclitus' terms?
Sure. Logos is probably the order in the universe, but there is a portion of the logos within us. And Bertrand Russell says that we can do sums, we can add and subtract, and that's the portion. It's also the portion within us that we can strengthen and brings eudaimonia, happiness, flourishing, thriving. So if we exercise the logos within us, then we learn that we're all connected. We learn to shape our behavior, be kind to others and helpful. And also the reason helps us with our psychological well-being, because we're choosing correct, rational thoughts and rejecting the others. But it also helps us with our goal setting and accomplishing the things that we prefer to obtain.
So sometimes Heraclitus is called the weeping philosopher or the obscure. Why do they call him the weeping philosopher or the obscure?
Well, I can take the obscure part. I can't remember the weeping part, but the obscure, I mean, again, you read his fragments, and like we've been talking about, you read it one time and you come to one understanding or meaning of what that is, but then you read it again and you might think of it in a different light. It's also kind of like we've seen some of those challenges on the internet where somebody says it's a blue dress versus a gray dress, and everybody's right. I think that's kind of how his fragments are, depending on how you're looking at certain things. But again, that's the nature of why he's obscure, is that he's kind of reflecting back to us to kind of say, think about these things, right? He's putting something out there, and it gives us a chance to kind of really ponder, deeply think, what does it mean?
A few more things about Heraclitus I just thought of is that he was apparently born into royalty, and he decided to forego all that to live a life of philosophy. And I believed he lived out in the woods or whatever it was, writing his fragments. And he was known as a very smart individual. And where he lived in Ephesus, they asked him to write some laws for the community. And he said that he would rather play with kids than do something like that. He might maybe weeping and obscure because he was a little difficult, according to the experts. Have you guys learned that as well?
Yeah, I think somber, melancholic, I think, are a couple of words to describe him too. Yeah.
He didn't think much of other people and didn't think much of philosophers or poets. I'm not sure who he liked. Anyway, why, Paul, maybe you can jump on this one. Why did he write fragments and wrote them in a paradoxical style?
That's a good question. I think I saw this in Braun's book, may have been Geldart, but he wrote in paradox so that those that were criticizing him or looking at his work would not understand what he was talking about. Sometimes the philosophers ran into trouble if they said things that perhaps the king or local officials didn't like.
I also believe Angie Hobbs said in our intro video in the class that he wrote that way because certain people, if you just said explicitly what he wanted to say, you would be shunned or looked down upon, looked at as some kind of preacher or some lack of a better word.
Well, I mean, also too, I mean, you think about how Socrates taught, I mean, the Socratic method, and then maybe that's kind of another way that he was teaching his students, perhaps, to kind of say, think for yourself. Don't just take what I've given you. I've put it in a way to make you really think and take a deeper dive into what philosophy means.
What are some of his key themes throughout the fragments? Ralph, you got a couple of them?
Well, it's definitely logos, which I like the most. The idea of that everything is flowing or everything is in flux. Then we have the fire, which is like the his main principle or his main cosmic principle, where other philosophers had, I don't know, water or air. His main principle was fire, and there's the idea as well of the harmony of contradictions, not contradictions, but Don mentioned it before.
Tension,
right? Yeah, tension.
Can you name any others, Paul?
Sure. The idea of the continuum, that things are continuous. He talked about nature and living in accordance with nature, and that goes to your earlier question, why the Stoics like him. They wanted to follow nature. There was also stuff on spiritual life as well as the divine. And then the paradoxes point to the transcendent. So the immanent and the transcendent is what he's pointing to. It's within us and it's also everywhere else.
I think change and flux is another one too. I mean, we talk about the river not being the same. We talk about the evolution of the universe, and again, just the constant changing of everything. Flux was another one.
Another few, I think, is the unity of opposites. All things are one. Strife is another one that he focuses on, and things are often not what they seem is another, I would say, a key theme of his. So let's go around to each of you guys here. We can start with you, Don. How do his fragments resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you want us to share some of our favorite fragments now, or
we'll get to that.
Later?
Let's just do overall.
Overall, yeah. So for me, and I'll talk about it when I share like the fragment that I wrote. But for me, it's that strife, it's that tension. Just a little bit about me, and this is one of the fascinating things that I learned from taking the course that you put together on Heraclitus is the concept of tension and strife. Okay, I come from a religious background where contention, in fact, this is a motto: contention is of the devil. So if you contended, that was not a good thing. And I've come to learn that tension, strife, debate is a good thing. Good things come from tension. Good things come from strife. In fact, one of my favorite books that I've read from a classicist is called "The Father of Us All," and he took that from Heraclitus's fragment, and meaning war is the father of us all, and that war is something that can be good, and we typically in the West have kind of thought that war is not good. I think there's senseless killing, there's senseless wars that can happen. But at the same time, good things can come from strife, can come from debate, can come from, that war, right? And so just simply taking a blanket statement saying contention's bad and you shouldn't have any strife or tension whatsoever, I'm not so sure that that's correct.
Excellent. Ralph, how do the fragments resonate with you personally?
Personally, in the beginning, when I first read Heraclitus fragments, and even when I started the course, my thought was, okay, what can a few fragments really accomplish? So the idea was, would be interesting, nice, maybe nothing. But I have to say, in the end, they did a lot. So those fragments did a lot to me, because I think the course guided me properly through with understanding. So. And I really started to get a better idea of Heraclitus when I've written the essay. So what I get out of him is that each paradox gains a certain depth through different emphasis on the words. So when you take one fragment and you put the emphasis on one word, you get like a whole new world, but you have to connect this world with the world of another word that comes right after in the same paradox. And it's like that. He has the ability to create in my mind some kind of multiple words or multiple meanings that when connected create something bigger.
Excellent. How about you, Paul?
What comes to mind is as I went through the course, I was surprised because it transformed me. And it has for my students. By the time we got through the course, it transformed my view of all of it, not only religion, but my view of nature. No man steps into the same river twice. It also pointed to some experiences that I've had standing in a river, and just everything opens up. The cosmos, I become aware of nature who loves to hide. And the paradox somehow pointed me to that metaxy in between the world and something beyond the world.
For me personally, I've mentioned this before, but Heraclitus's fragments, I say, underpin or reinforce my Stoic practice. And a primary one for me is flux. That everything's changing, like the river one. Like, for example, I try to keep at hand Heraclitus's ideas on flux. For example, if I'm sitting there with some of my friends who I don't see very often, and you're having a nice time, trying to stay in the moment and appreciate that, because this is the only time this is ever going to happen like this. And I thought of it today. I was walking my dogs in the woods, and I have a dog that's getting older, and I'm just trying to stay mindful of that experience because I don't know how much longer I'll have this. And so that's where Heraclitus really strikes home for me, especially on the flux end of things. So thank you guys for sharing that. What we're going to do next is each of us have chosen a fragment or two, and I'd like you to share your fragment you choose and why it's one of your it would be on your Heraclitus's greatest hits. So Don, you ready to go first?
Yeah, am I gonna? I picked two. Do you want me to cover both, or are we gonna kind of do rounds
Let's
here?
Let's do a round.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so like the first one I picked, I went back to kind of the course and reread some of the ones that I had read before and kind of noted down and looked at some of the commentary I wrote. But this one comes from Fragment 87. This is the Robinson translation. And again, that's the other aspect too, is like the more translations you read of Heraclitus, the more meaning you get out of it. So I picked the various translation, but it's Fragment 87.
And also the different fragments have different numbers too.
Yes.
It's not as on as Marcus.
That's why I wanted to simply say this is Fragment 87 based on Robinson's book. And if we can provide, show notes, I can give you the reference to that. But basically, the fragment goes, a stupid, sluggish person tends to become all worked up over every statement he hears. And for me, that resonated with me because I myself have had to train myself not to have snap judgments. This goes back to assent, ascesis. I think that's the Greek term to basically assent to valid logical arguments. And so when something happens, sometimes we jump to a conclusion. And so as a Stoic, you say, pause, like Chris Fisher says, let me evaluate you before I jump to a value judgment. And so to this point, Heraclitus is kind of saying people get worked up over all these statements. And you can kind of see in modern culture today, a lot of people are that way. And so I have an appreciation that what Stoicism has taught me to kind of say, don't jump to conclusions so quickly. And anyway, that's based in Heraclitus's fragment, basically saying sluggish and stupid people, they get worked up over pretty much everything.
That's a great one to keep at hand. I really like that one, Don. All right, Paul, what's a fragment you have?
My favorite fragment, because I'm a fly fisherman, is you only step into the river once. Here's what Harris says. His name's William Harris. I like that translation. He says, they do not step into the same rivers. It is other and still other waters that are flowing. And then also 21, you've got to read both of them to get it. You cannot step twice into the same river, for other waters and yet others go forever flowing. And they go forward and back again. And it's living in accordance with nature. It's that thing of being present, like you mentioned. If you take a look at the flux or the tension even, I'm living in accordance with nature. And the fish in the river, they sit in the tension between the bedroom and the kitchen. And as they sit there where they are away from the predators from the bank and also where the food is going by. And they sit there, and as the food comes by, they go out. They're living in accordance with nature, and then they come back into that scene. And a fly fisherman learns quickly that if you throw the fly through the seam, then you're going to catch a fish, and it requires perfect drift. And if this fly is going the exact same speed, and I think that it goes out to our lives. If I'm in balance, if I'm living in accordance with nature, I find myself more successful. I find my relationships healthier too because I'm in balance.
Outstanding.
I like that.
Ralph, you got one for us?
I have one. I prepared, or what I really like is fragment 45, which is about the Logos. And Burnett's translation is, you will not find the boundaries of soul by traveling in any direction. So deep is the measure of it. And what I like, maybe what I want to demonstrate is the idea of going deep into some words or emphasize some words and open these worlds. It's like when I emphasize or put the emphasis on traveling. Maybe in some translations we also have like going. In a German translation there was going, and you can say, okay, is it even the right method to explore the soul? Is going or traveling the right method, or can the soul even be grasped through spatial movement? Who knows? And then when you put the emphasis on any direction, it sounds like, okay, is the search maybe futile, or maybe it's insufficient anyway? Or does the quantity in exploration lead to the right quality of insight? Then there's the question of boundaries here. Maybe the soul is boundless, unlimited, and not measurable. And it's so deep when you put the emphasis on deep, on the deepness. Maybe it's deep in terms of another dimension, like behind the surface. What's the depth behind depth?
Excellent. What I'm going to choose for mine is from the John Burnett translation from 1908 that my very first encounter with it. And as a person who finds a lot of value, and I'm very interested in panpsychism and pantheism, like the Stoics, I'll sometimes refer to this is how sharp Heraclitus was, is to have this fragment 500 BC that I think resonates now. And it's fragment number 91a, and he simply says, "Thought is common to all," which to me represents panpsychism, pantheism. I think he's on to that with that fragment.
I like that. That's good.
All right, let's do one more each. Don, what's your second one?
The second one, I pulled from the essay I wrote from the class, just a section of it. It's fragment 119. And again, I'm going to read kind of three different translations of it because, again, every translation pulls at a different meaning. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. But fragment 119, Geldard, in his book, he says most of the translations are simply character is fate. Sweet's translation from 2007 says one's character is one's divine fortune. Robinson translated as a person's character is his fate, parentheses, divinity. And then Geldard actually translated as for human beings, character is the divine force. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that, reading those different translations. And in fact, basically it's like, okay, what does it mean? Is your destiny how you're born that just determines your fate, or is it your circumstances? What is it? Is there something about you uniquely doing that? And I basically kind of said it's kind of two sides of the coin. One is like what Heidegger would say, your thrownness. You're thrown into this world. It's basically all the stuff that came before you, your ancestors, the nation, the city, the family you were born in. All that is kind of one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is what do you do about it? And I think a perfect example of that is Shawshank Redemption and Andy Dufresne. He was thrown curveball, horrible things, but he decided what he was going to do with that. And that's why we root for Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption, because he eventually came out on top. And so his character became his fate. His fate became his character.
Excellent movie reference. I have to do a top 5 Stoic or top 3 Stoic movies podcast someday for sure. That might be up there. Paul, what's your second favorite fragment?
My second favorite fragment from Harris is Homer was wrong in saying, would that strife might perish from amongst gods and men, for if this were to occur, then all things would cease to exist. And that resistance to the flux is where a lot of psychologically, physically, everything, problems arise. Nietzsche says, amor fati, love of fate. And that's a big one for Heraclitus for me, because now I'm not resisting things that are out of my control. And Epictetus talks about that. Jung said that if we realize and take a look at ourselves closely, the inner civil war comes to an end. And then Socrates says, know thyself. Ward Farnsworth says, and I've learned this in Marcus Aurelius' program, he says, experiment and reflect. And that is such a great thing about Stoicism. You can experiment and reflect. That which we resist persists. And that's really the blessing of Heraclitus, is the tension is okay. Let's get the tension into harmony, into balance, and tune up that guitar string. And that's the joy I get from that.
I love it. Ralph, what's your second?
My second one is fragment 40, which is the learning of many things does not teach understanding. Otherwise, it would have taught Hesiod and Pythagoras, and again, Xenophanes and Heraclitus. So when he says, okay, the learning of many things, like it's the criticism of too much knowledge, too much stuff that doesn't lead to anything, which in the end doesn't teach anything. So it's somehow impossible to transfer the kind of knowledge Heraclitus is looking for through common means. And maybe he's also referring to self-realization instead of passive absorption of knowledge, of stuff. And I think this is because he was referring to a different kind of understanding, like he's using the Greek word nous. It's more like understanding instead of knowledge, what we have as episteme in this case. And he's also criticizing his colleagues that were also followed the path of wisdom, like the Hesiod guy was all about mythology, Pythagoras was mathematics, numerology, Xenophanes was a philosopher, Heraclitus was a geographer, was into geography and history, but none of these sages attained the correct understanding, at least from Heraclitus' perspective.
Excellent. My second one deals with what Don was talking about earlier with strife and opposites, how it can all create unity. Mine's from the Burnett translation again. Fragment number 104. It is not good for men to get all they wish to get. It is sickness that makes health pleasant, evil good, hunger plenty, weariness rest. An example I used here, I like the book Moby Dick, and the one line that stuck out to me is when the character's trying to go to sleep and he keeps one toe outside of the bed so he knows it's cold, so he realizes where the warmth is. That's my second favorite one. Anyway, so one thing I also asked you fellas to do, and I really appreciate how the class culminates, is you become a Heraclitus. So by module 5, you write your own fragments and explain them in the style of Heraclitus, using the themes of Heraclitus, and I asked each one of us to share one of ours that we wrote for the class. So this ought to be interesting. So let's keep rolling with the circle. Let's go. Don, can you share one of the fragments you wrote when you became a Heraclitus?
Yeah, sure. So again, like what you talked about, the tension, I try to combine kind of the tension plus the fire plus the creation plus the flux all together. Anyway, so mine was 2 sticks in grinding tension create heat, and then fire. Lightning too can create a fire. All fire decomposes and creates rebirth. And so again, it's just kind of that strife where there's kind of grinding going on, but in that tension, in that grind, there's a spark, and that spark then kind of is a catalyst for change and is a catalyst for rebirth, all that together.
Excellent, my friend. I love that. I love that. Paul, what's one of the fragments that you wrote when you became a Heraclitus?
All right, I brought one from one of my students.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, it's really good to watch him transform. I think he's from Tasmania, so he's south. So we have students from everywhere in the class. Giving needs receiving, while an imposition is unwelcome. And it is natural for us to give presents or to donate goods to organizations, but sometimes the wrong thing in the wrong place is unwanted and a burden. this could also go for compliments and advice, wisdom and moderation. So that's why the Stoics love it.
Excellent. Outstanding. Thanks for sharing that, Paul. Ralph, what's one of the fragments you wrote?
So I wrote one which is like, it is terrible to be frightened by the Logos, but it does not frighten the Logos. So the idea is to say, okay, there's in the end nothing terrible to try to get the idea or to grasp the Logos, because in the end it doesn't care. So it's or maybe it cares, but it's not terrible. So go ahead and try to grasp it, please.
Great work, my friend. Great work. Mine that I wrote is, my mind is intertwined with the mind that is all minds, yet has no mind.
Mm-hmm.
Showing that the cosmos has no brain, it is all, and that we are all one. Got it?
Very cool. I like that.
I like that one too. But anyway, so thank you guys for sharing yours. Thank you guys for coming on the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. I love you guys. Don, appreciate it. Paul, Ralph, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll have you guys on again sometime.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. Please visit the collegeofstoicphilosophers.org for information on the college, e-journal, and course offerings. Till next time, Pro Couch.